Hello and welcome to another episode of What the Hype. This week, we are leaving the Onyx Storm behind and boarding the Onyx Cinder. It's time to ditch school, Micah, because we're blasting off through the barrier into a galaxy filled with pirates and ne'er-do-wells. And this episode of our podcast is all about Skeleton Crew, which is the latest Disney Plus series to be set in the Star Wars universe. I mentioned Mike is here. I'm Eric. Hey, Micah. How's it going?
Hey, Eric. Yeah, going well. And I love the fact that we didn't even plan it this way. Did we know going in that there was going to be this tie between Onyx Storm and Onyx Cinder?
Didn't know.
Isn't it nice sometimes? I feel like that's a sign for us that we were supposed to do these two episodes the way that we did.
This
Pam
is
and Laura last week, and now us this week.
This is a good lean in to next week's episode on the Pokemon Onyx. And
I feel it's only appropriate.
Yeah.
If I were Onyx, I would feel a little bit left out at this point.
Honestly, rock type Pokemon are very overlooked.
Yeah. Throw in a few Geodudes and a
Graveler too.
Mm-hmm.
How many more can you name that aren't evolutions of Geodude? Yeah, I can't either.
Machop, is that considered rock or no? Not really.
Yeah,
no,
I think
fighting, right?
I think it's normal / rock. I don't know. I'm actually going back through Pokemon Yellow Legacy through an emulator, which is pretty cool, but a different topic entirely. For listeners, we again are going to be talking about Skeleton Crew. The first part of our episode will be sort of broad strokes, and then we will get to talking about the finale, because I think we were surprised by a early release of the final episode. I wasn't expecting it for another couple days.
Yeah, clearly, because I let you know, hey, Eric, well, I was working through this show planning, and you said, well, the first 7 episodes are fine because the finale isn't going to be out yet by the time we record. And lo and behold, I went on last night to watch and catch up on all the episodes. And right there, it said season finale now available. So I think that's another sign that we're supposed to be doing this episode today. So, but all 8 episodes should now be out at the time of this release.
Absolutely. And for those curious, and I count myself in this, when we were doing the show planning, I thought, well, there have been a lot of seasons of Star Wars TV series now, live action TV series. And I was familiar with a few of them, but I decided to look up and see, well, how many have there been? And in fact, this is the 7th live action TV series that I'm counting.
Another sign. Number 7.
Oh, number 7. Matt, we're going to keep calling out all the signs why this is smart for us to be doing this. But yeah, number 7 of the live action since George Lucas sold the Star Wars universe to Disney. And we'll talk a little bit more about the other projects and things, how we feel about what it's like to have multiple creators in the universe. But here's a quick recap of those. They are The Mandalorian, which debuted in 2019. It's had 3 seasons so far. The Book of Boba Fett has had 1 season that came out in 2021 between seasons like 2 and 3 of Mandalorian. There was the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Micah, if you haven't seen that, it's excellent. Only 6 episodes, I think. And Ewan McGregor reprises his role. There's a few other familiar faces from the movies in that. It's excellent. There is, of course, also Andor, which the 2nd season is coming in April. Disney Plus tells me. Very exciting. The first season was really, really, really good. Ahsoka, which is 1 season that came out in 2023. The Acolyte, which came out within, sort of the same year as Skeleton Crew, but within the last year. And then Skeleton Crew. So a lot of these shows do take place in the same-ish era, which is this friendly little space after the events of Return of the Jedi and before The Force Awakens. There's a new republic. It seems like there's, especially with The Mandalorian, a chance to be like the Wild West of we don't really know what the galaxy is like. There's no major First Order, that was like the major drag in the sequel trilogy. So I think it's a very fertile ground for them to be telling stories in.
Yeah, and just in terms of the ones I'm familiar with, The Mandalorian, I've seen all 3 seasons. And then after that, it gets a little bit murky. I've seen at least an episode or 2 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then obviously Skeleton Crew, I've watched the full season that's been released. Now, I'm very excited based on the experience in watching Skeleton Crew to go back and to watch some of these other series. And it just was kind of refreshing to go back into this world. And I'll be fully transparent in that, I'm a Star Wars fan, but I'm not a diehard. I don't know all the terms and character, and
you're not fluent in Huttese.
Definitely not. But I think that's part of why we do this type of a podcast, right? It's the range of fans that exist out there. And I think we'll get into that a little bit as we talk about Skeleton Crew. But I did thoroughly enjoy it. It was a lot of fun just to sit down and watch. It was a relatively quick watch, I would say, too. And
yeah,
you felt carried through from one episode to the next. And that's what I think makes for good TV. You want to be engaged.
Episode after episode, I could not believe it was over. Like at any one episode, they have a runtime anywhere between 30 and 45 minutes ish. But even the longer ones felt like 20 minutes. It just kind of flew by. They told a very straightforward ish sort of story. They had kind of the idea of what kind of show they wanted to be. And 8 episodes, flash in the pan, it's done. I think, though, to your point about why we do this show, but also I want to make a point of Star Wars as a whole. I think it's famously accessible as a franchise. I think that you can get as into it or as not into it as you want. You can just watch the original trilogy, and you know what? That would actually be fine for some people. Like it would bring you the same sense of joy that I, for instance, get watching all of the films, many and most of the TV series, because they have a very clear, sort of clearly established vision of what the world looks like of Star Wars, what the whole galaxy looks like. Granted, we're still lifting up rocks and seeing what new corners we can get into, but there is a very polished look to every one of these Star Wars shows, and the continuity, like from a visual standpoint, is so strong that you really can just pick and choose whatever you want to watch. And if you're liking it, great. And if you don't like something, try a different show, because it can still be in that same universe. You might actually love it. The Mandalorian's more of a Western. The Skeleton Crew we'll get into, but they're all different genres essentially too.
That's definitely something that I think would be appealing for a lot of different folks who grew up watching those original Star Wars movies. Like you were saying, I'm an 80s/early 90s kid, so I very much grew up on episodes 4, 5, and 6, and was going to the movie theaters to see when they came out digitally remastered, which was a awesome experience. But I'm certainly familiar with episodes 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9. And, as you were saying, they don't always appeal to everybody. There are those who are kind of the diehards with those original 3 films and don't like to deviate too much. But then this is something that I think we've seen a lot of in different franchises, and that is the spinning off and world building and following different characters in different time periods. And I think that through the list that you described earlier, there are shows that clearly were big hits, and there were shows that probably aren't going past one season. And that's okay, because you have to do a bit of trial and error. And it's something that I know that, we've talked a lot about with the upcoming Harry Potter TV show. Now, this isn't necessarily a spin-off, but it is, in some ways a recreation of what we experienced with the original 8 Harry Potter films. But I guess I'm trying to get at here is looking at what Star Wars has done. Is this a bit of a roadmap for the Wizarding World and for the Harry Potter franchise? Learn from their mistakes, learn from their successes.
Yeah, if possible. I mean, if they want to go that route, they're going to need to greenlight 10 different productions with different showrunners. That I cannot stress this enough. Get a dozen other writers other than the series author to be writing and thinking and show running and creating and producing in this world. That's what Star Wars did. And there's no shortcuts for this. But Star Wars is so elastic that you can set a story about 4 children lost in the galaxy and do a show about it. You can set a story about the emotional impact of the Obi-Wan and Anakin falling out and tell a story just about that and have it be short-lived 6 episodes, but be awesome. You can go as narrow or as wide in scope as you want. And I don't think the Harry Potter TV series is going to be doing that. I'd love to be surprised. But I think that, like Star Wars, Harry Potter has a wide enough world where you really could do some of these other genre shows. If the studios and creators hadn't sort of given up on their own attempt to expand the world, which it seems like they've done for many reasons. But getting back to sort of Star Wars, I did want to ask because, so you've seen the movies. And then as far as the TV shows, you're caught up on The Mandalorian. I would say Book of Boba Fett, again, short season. It ends up being toward the back half of the Boba Fett season, also a Mandalorian half season, essentially. If you ever wonder how Grogu got back with Mando, that happens in Book of Boba Fett. It was kind of controversial.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought this up because I can't recall where we've had this conversation before, but it's definitely come up. I was very confused at the start of season 3 of The Mandalorian. I did not watch, as we just talked about, the Book of Boba Fett. So it was just, there was a major disconnect going on. And I don't think that Disney Plus did a very good job of setting up the viewer. Yeah. At least in my experience. But that's where I like the cross collaboration though. If I had been watching that show, then I probably would have really enjoyed the fact that the 3rd season of The Mandalorian was starting off based on things that had happened in the Book of Boba Fett. So, and there were a lot of Easter eggs, probably many that I didn't catch in Skeleton Crew. But those are the types of things I think as a fan, even a very kind of basic fan like myself could appreciate, right? Like there was a character very much who looked like Jabba the Hutt in Skeleton Crew. Now, he was bathing at a spa in one of the episodes, not what I was anticipating by any stretch. But that was a nice little Easter egg, I think, for Star Wars fans.
Yeah, your point of reference, your point of connection, what will emotionally impact you is unpredictable. And so there's something for everybody in it. But one thing that I think Skeleton Crew, kind of leaning in closer to this specific series, does well is capture a childlike sense of wonder that has not really been done before. I mean, even in Star Wars 1977, Luke is 17 years old. There really aren't children in the Star Wars universe. There are in some of the animated series, or, there's different aspects. Obi-Wan had a young character, but never were they the focus, and never was the sort of magnifying glass on what it's like to be a kid in peacetime, it's worth saying, in the New Republic.
Peacetime because their world is
sheltered and
exactly.
Yeah. Well,
so it's always peacetime for them until it's
the Empire has fallen. They just don't know about it. Do you feel that Skeleton Crew accurately captures, I don't know, what it felt like for us watching those movies for the first time, and like what it feels like to be a kid and feel like the universe is infinite?
It did have that feeling, and for me, the closest comparison I can make to like a TV series that's out today it reminded me a lot of watching Stranger Things, especially when the kids were younger. And I think your assessment of it being very much like the Goonies is a good one. There's probably other movies or TV shows that you could point to growing up that it created this sense of wonder, and you could see yourself, or you can imagine yourself is probably the better way to put it, being in a similar situation to the kids that we see in this show, right? That we'll talk a little bit about this, but the family dynamics, you probably could associate or feel some of the same things that Wim or Fern or KB or Neil felt in their particular households. Like the fact that we're able to go inside their house, really spend time with their parents, spend time with their siblings, see how they interact with their parents. I think any kid could probably associate with that and connect with a character, like we see in this show.
Yeah, I like that a lot as well. And I think to your point, family dynamics, another thing we don't see a lot of in Star Wars. We know there are family members in Star Wars, going back to Empire Strikes Back. But it's not they're not a unit. They're not a whole unit. You don't see how the household runs really. And I liked that at sort of the beginning and the end of Skeleton Crew, the emphasis was on kind of who these kids are in the context of who are they in their family or to their family members.
Yeah, absolutely. And the experiences that they have outside of the experience they have with the pirate, let's just say for now, but like missing the school bus, right? That's something
that was hilarious.
all of us as kids at some point experienced.
Yep.
Being really stressed out about taking a test, and you're seeing it though happening in this universe, right? Happening in this planet of Ad-Atten, and you, if you're a kid, you could say, hey, you know what? I identify with Wim and what he's going through in this particular situation. Maybe you have a little bit of a stressful relationship with one of your parents, right? Who's, in this case, his dad's a workaholic and doesn't pay a whole lot of attention to him. And that's most likely what leads to a lot of this situation playing out the way that it does.
Yeah.
But family dynamics are a huge part of this show in a way that I don't think that we've seen in other, Star Wars shows or the movies themselves.
Yeah. So we're going to get into a little bit more of the origins and our thoughts on Skeleton Crew in just a moment. But first, we're going to do an ad break. Welcome back. Okay, so here is a little bit of research I did on sort of how this show came to be. Surprisingly, I did not know this. John Watts, who is best known for directing the MCU Spider-Man trilogy with Tom Holland and Zendaya, co-created this show with Christopher Ford, who he co-wrote the episodes with. And the idea was very much to tell a Spielberg-esque story involving children coming of age set within the Star Wars universe. So there was this intention early on to kind of see what that would look like to have your main characters be children. And I'll tell you, like the consequence of that choice and the best things about this series come from that same decision, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I mean, even just being reminded what it's like to feel how you feel when you miss the bus is great. Or who among us, to your point, hasn't been told that there's this test ahead of us that will determine our entire future.
Right.
And it's the night before and we didn't study. I really enjoyed seeing in the beginning episode or two, this sort of idyllic community that they were growing up in. And it wasn't without its peculiarities. There was a surprising lack of sort of people or oversight, or something seemed off about it. But they were well fed. They were, taken care of as kids, except for their possible either inattentive or overbearing parents. But soon the curtain is pulled back and we see more of the Star Wars universe that we would be familiar with, including some corners that were not, namely the pirates, like you mentioned. And I really just loved the sort of tranquility at first. Then, you mentioned the main character, Wim, too, having essentially a bigger imagination than his lot in life will afford him. His imagination,
he wants
his
adventure.
hopes.
I think that's brought up explicitly multiple times in the show, is that he's looking for an adventure, and what kid really isn't looking for an adventure?
He wants to meet a Jedi. I mean, this does go back to Luke Skywalker. All he ever wanted was to get off the planet Tatooine where he grew up. And, the idea of the Jedi or mystical powers or a destiny ahead of all of us, not limited to that which your parents or, guardians say is your destiny, forging your own path. All of the kids want that to some extent.
You can see how the Jedi are revered. I think it's even right in that first episode where Wim is coming out to catch the bus and he encounters Neil on the street and they start dueling with each other.
Yeah.
And again, it's what kids haven't kind of role played in that way, whether it's Star Wars or any other series that they love.
Yeah. It just felt good. It felt really good to watch kids being kids. Right. And I will say that the charisma of each of the actors really carried through the whole series.
It did.
So I also think in general, the series feels fresh. I don't know, because we haven't mentioned yet the fifth character, which is Jude, played by Jude Law, who, although
Albus
I'm sad,
Dumbledore.
Yeah, he may not be Dumbledore for much any more movies or TV series, but I am glad to see him because he has embodied this character of Jude, this space pirate who's sort of disgraced from his own people when we meet him, somehow has access to a bit of the Force, which he dangles like a carrot. But clearly there is more to that character than is revealed until, later on in the season. And I think he does very well as the fifth member of this quartet. If you're not counting 33, but I think he's a good character for the rest of for the kids to play off.
Yeah. And at times he is instrumental to helping them try and get back home. And he clearly has his own objectives as to why he wants to find At-Aten and what it could potentially represent for him and these other pirates. But I do agree, he is a nice counterbalance to the kids. And I think he has some really great moments with the kids. And that's what makes his character so interesting, because you're wondering to yourself, who is this guy at the end of the day? He's clearly spent some time behind bars. We see really the series open with the mutiny, so to speak, and him being arrested. And yet there are these kind of tender moments that he has, particularly with Wim.
Yeah.
And so you're asking yourself the question, what more are we going to learn about him? And we can talk more about this kind of with what may lie in the future for this show. If in fact they do get a second season, I think it's probably learning a little bit more about Jude and who he is and his backstory. But there were moments where he definitely connected with the kids in a way that would suggest that maybe he's not all that bad. And I don't know if we want to get into the Captain Jack Sparrow comparison.
Well, that's a fun one. When you mentioned it, we were talking about the show earlier. I guess while watching the show, I thought that Jod really reminded me of somebody, and I couldn't picture who it was, and I couldn't think about it. But there is certainly an element of Captain Jack Sparrow. And look, let's be honest, Disney series or movie, pirate captain, and seems a bit aloof, like, not able to, like, not just never fully attentive, but he's clever and has tricks up his. I can see it, is what I'm saying.
I can see it too. I don't know if I like it all that much though, and I did really like Jude Law and his portrayal of Jod, but there were moments where I felt like he was trying to be a little too much of Captain Jack Sparrow. Maybe the way he delivered some of the lines or some of the movements that he made, and it didn't work for this show, and so that would be my only criticism. But I do think that maybe there was a little bit of an attempt to infuse Pirates of the Caribbean, Captain Jack Sparrow, because as you mentioned, the Disney connection there.
Well, it's almost like, what do you want out of
and they're pirates at the end of the day?
What do you want out of pirates in any production? You want them to kind of deliver laughs. You also want them to be a believable threat when they need to be. I think that what I like about the Jod character and kind of the overall arc of this first season is that we were never promised that he was going to be a morally good character all the time. I think the show really hedged its bets and showed us these tender moments, to your point, where he's really mentoring Wim and kind of leaning into the boy's imagination and taking charge and telling the kids that he's going to help them get back home, to at the same time essentially threatening them or doing things that put them in danger. And so I think it's definitely was a delicate balancing act, because outside of Jod and the pirates that they meet him with, there's not a larger series antagonist to the characters. I'm trying not to say villain, because I think one of the great things about Jod is it's more of an antagonist thing. There is, of course, the classic Star Wars trope where the villain has a helmet, a big black helmet. Right. But, he only wears it in a scene or two to connect back to the beginning of the show, and then it's blasted off or something ridiculous. So, at least grateful for that.
And I do think it's probably worth saying for people who might be listening who aren't familiar with the show that basically what's happened is these kids have founded a spaceship. They've somehow activated that spaceship, and they've been able to escape their planet, which has been hidden for, I don't know how long, but a considerable period of time from the rest of the world, from the rest of the galaxy. And now they have found themselves in a little bit of trouble with some pirates, and Jod, who they were initially imprisoned with, is going to help them get back to their home planet.
It's sort of a fun conceit that they come from this hidden planet, because to them it's just home. They don't have this, I guess, great concept of their place in the galaxy, because they're too sheltered. All there is on at Aten is the so-called great work that they train for, that they study for. All of their parents are in these boring-ish, I don't want to pass judgment, really boring analyst jobs.
Government jobs.
Fern's mother is, it's for the government, and it's for a function that is questionably beneficial to everyone. Essentially, this is the place where dreams go to die. There's, you're told that you can do one of these few things. You can be an analyst or maybe a politician, depending on how you do on your exams. There's not room for a dreamer like Wim or KB. For somebody who is as adaptable as KB or as fierce as Fern, the contrast, for instance, between Fern and her mom couldn't be more stark. I think throughout the show, Fern is thrust into a leadership role, but it looks way different than the leadership role that her mom has.
Right. And I mean, this is the ultimate run away from home. Yeah, that's what I was just thinking about as we were discussing this. You were talking about being a kid. One of the things you would always threaten to do as a kid is to run away from home. And this obviously goes wildly off course from what any of them had anticipated. But that's another one of those themes.
I love that.
Is
but like that, for the kids who actually did run away from home, and I'm not sure if I ever really attempted it, but I think the theme from people that did do it that I know, friends of mine, etc., is you begin to immediately regret it after you do it, or you begin to miss those things that you took for granted. And I'm not even talking about the parents. I'm talking about maybe the Sony PlayStation, and very quickly these kids who really didn't intend to leave their planet's atmosphere and trap themselves outside the planet's barrier with no known way of getting back, they too begin to, I think, appreciate the stability of their upbringing, because the life outside of their planet in the galaxy abroad is anything but stable.
Right. And to the point that you brought up earlier with the parents having these jobs that are boring and bureaucratic in nature, we see the skill sets that many of these kids have put to good use and could be potential job opportunities in the future, right? With what Wim and Neil and KB are able to do on the ship.
Yeah.
What Wim is able to do for KB in a huge moment of crisis.
Oh, God.
And it just shows you that there are so many other talents that they have that would otherwise probably be ignored, forgotten, suppressed in this world of Ad-Aten, that they would, had they not escaped, they probably would never have put any of these things to use. Like the fact that Neil can fly the plane, or not fly the Onyx Cinder, excuse me, not the plane. It's I'm going to get yelled at for calling it a plane.
We all say things like that. It's fun. It flew the plane. Well, the other thing about Neil that I love too, and sort of in a general sense, because we're still before not talking about anything in the finale. Neil has a wonderful episode, and each of the kids, you do get time with each of the kids separately. Either they're separated from the group, or they're off in pairs, and then they switch it up and are with a different pair. And so you really see how they interact. You see how they interact with the adults around them. With Neil, he is very much, I wouldn't say a pacifist, as if you could call a child a pacifist, but he is seen to really love his comfort. And he is the kid most unsettled by the fact that he can't go home right away at the end of the day. He's a good student. He behaves. He believes that everything that are rules in society exist for a reason. And when he is catapulted into a lawless, desolate wasteland of a planet at some point later in the season, it's his sort of purity and optimism that changes that world for the better. And he wouldn't have gotten a chance to do that. And to your point, I think would have really been underused by his own people if he had stayed on the planet and never left it. Where would those qualities, like, yeah, sure, if you're a pacifist, or if you just let the world happen to you, okay, you would fit right in on it at Aden. But he got to go to a place where that was a real strength of his, instead of just the thing that everybody has.
And had a little bit of a crush too. Seemed like it was mutual. It wasn't just a one-way crush, but
and that speaks to the coming of age thing too, where it's like, oh, I'm feeling new things, or I'm just experiencing new things. It's all a part of growing up.
The other thing I thought that this show did a really good job of was introducing some fun new characters, creature characters.
Oh yeah.
Kim. I
Yeah.
call her basically Owl Yoda. That's what immediately came to mind. Yoda came to mind when I saw her.
Yeah. I was thinking of Owl Professor Sprout. She's just seems to be bewildered and may have a mean streak. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, any cute, fluffy, young, small creature would fit right in the Star Wars universe, and Star Wars has no shortage of them. Kim is a good character who appears in a couple of episodes.
Yeah.
Even just what makes a space pirate tick in this show in the Star Wars universe felt real. It felt thought out, at least. And in fact, it's surprising because there are moments when the show gets, I don't want to say rough, I want to say either scary or where you feel like the stakes are real. The stakes are really, really, really real. And it's amazing watching this show like this toe the line because when you get sort of a raison d'etre for the pirates to be the way they are, it comes in a speech from Jod who says, I was always hungry. I've always been hungry. For as long as I can remember, I've been hungry. He's not talking about being greedy. He's talking about literally living in a hole and not having enough to feed himself. And so if you want to then extrapolate that into this adult group of pirates who, again, I think he asked them all in a very rousing speech, when was the last time you weren't hungry? And nobody in this whole spaceship can answer it. And it's literally, that's not a fantasy show talking. That's like actual human behavior and I think a poignant piece of self-reflection into what creates these types of characters.
Definitely. There are probably some real world comparisons you can make here as well, but the hunger that Jod has is ultimately what's driving him to do the things that he's doing. And I think that is why it would be so interesting to get a spin-off series or an origin story, or in season 2 of the Skeleton Crew to explore that a little bit more, because going back to what we were talking about earlier, we don't know a whole lot about him. And really the focal point of this season and this show was the kids, and rightfully so. He was the fifth wheel, really, but there's a lot to him, and I think I would be interested in learning more about him, and really, I know we're not going to get into spoilers, but the way he's left in the finale, like what is his future now, given how things wrap up at the end of season 1.
So while we're still on the sort of non-spoiler side of things, were there any other characters you wanted to talk about, or even the main characters? I really enjoyed the close-up we got on KB. She's a very interesting sort of character in a very interesting situation.
Do we know exactly what happened to her?
It was some level of injury and some level of augmentation. Think back to Empire Strikes Back when Luke, sort of gets his hand, or at the end of it, and then before then is able to be revived in the back of the tank after the creature hits him on Hoth. But the kind of ways in which the lines blur between machine and person in Star Wars, starting way back when, but there have been many more examples. General Grievous was a big example, clones, all that other stuff. I take KB to be just a unique sort of offshoot of that. She is a person who was probably fully born human, who has had a procedure essentially that saved her life, but which means that she has more mechanical realities to consider.
Got it. So you asked about other characters. I know we talked a little bit about Kim, and she obviously plays a pivotal role in the finale. There were little characters here and there that I enjoyed. The fact that Jaleel White Steve Urkel, like throwing it back. You want to talk about like 80s and 90s sitcoms? Was one of the pirates, Gunther. It was funny seeing him on screen. I don't think I've seen him in anything in a very long time. And I had to ask myself the question, I'm like, is that Steve Urkel?
Yeah. Well, and you gotta
is Mr. Winslow going to show up?
You gotta assume that it's fun to play a goofy space pirate character. You know, I guess to not take oneself so seriously is a value that I greatly approve of in actors and people in general. And it seems like he had fun making this show.
Absolutely. I would have had fun myself. We talked a little bit about Pirates of the Caribbean. There was one character that looked a bit like Davy Jones.
Yes.
Vane.
Yeah, that.
And absolutely. This is not his only appearance in Star Wars spin-off series, is what I was reading. I'd have to go back and look where else he's shown up, but the fact that his face is what looked very much
Davy
like
Jones.
Davy
100%.
Jones.
Yeah.
Now, who else? Oh, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but Thalops. This was the creature in the spa that ultimately helps out
the benevolent creature,
the kids. Yeah, and you were talking about moments where things get real. You didn't know what was going to happen there, and the fact that this, I don't even know what kind of creature this is. I should probably look it up, but intimidating to say the least, and could easily have probably killed all of the kids and Jod with one wave of its tentacle, but it ends up playing a huge role in assisting them in what they're ultimately looking for at the spa.
In exchange for a story. And imagine, and this is not, I don't think it's kiddie or silly that their journey turned out that way, on that day. You have to believe that there are going to be those happy moments where you think all is lost and then something goes right for a change. Or that people who may look intimidating on the outside, on the inside are either big softies or going to value your humanity and personhood enough not to kill you on sight.
Right. I compare that with the cute little trash crabs that they follow.
Oh my God.
But that's your point, is that you do need to pay attention because looks can be deceiving.
Looks can indeed be deceiving. So I want to talk finale and I want to talk spoilers now. If you're ready, we're going to come back from the break and then we're going to talk about episode 8 and the season as a whole of Skeleton Crew.
That sounds good. The one other character I want to bring up, and you mentioned him earlier, that I think deserves just a couple minutes is SM33. And we can talk about him now, or we can do it on the other side of the break.
How could I have forgotten? No, well,
talk about
we do have
Pirate.
To go to ad break. Talk about Pirate. We've had droid characters droids are as synonymous with Star Wars as C-3PO and R2-D2. I mean, they've always been there. And they've always been a part of what makes Star Wars, what makes the universe, the universe. SM33 has been at times unreliable when the plot has called for it. He's an old beaten up droid that's seen a lot of things, not all which he remembers. But apart from those moments that are very clearly plot devices, he nevertheless is, I think, an amiable character that you grow to appreciate as the 6th crew member of the Onyx cylinder and the only original crew member, I'm guessing.
I was going to say original crew member. Does he go ahead? He probably goes ahead of Jod. I don't know.
Yeah, he was there first before they, when they blasted off. So
yes, that's a really good point. But
6th in terms of us getting to him. And I can't believe I overlooked that.
No, but as you said, a really great character in the mold of a C-3PO / R2-D2, has great lines and personality throughout. And there's some things I want to talk about related to him, though, that are a bit spoilery, so maybe we get to that on the other side of this break.
Let's do it. We're going to take a break now, and when we come back, we'll be talking about the finale and the season as a whole of Skeleton Crew. Stay tuned. We're back. Okay, again, this is now our fully spoiler season 1 Skeleton Crew appreciation moment podcast area. Micah, what's on your mind?
So one of the questions that you have in here is, where does it rank overall in relation to the rest of the series? I wasn't blown away by the finale. There's no cliffhanger, really. There's nothing that's making me want a season 2 tomorrow, unless I miss something after the credits. But
I did notice something after the credits, but I'll tell you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, it's not so much a scene, but I'll tell you in a bit.
Okay. And that said, like, there were other episodes that I enjoyed a lot more than the finale itself. There are other things, though, that I think that the writers can pick up on if, in fact, the season 2 is greenlit. The one thing I wanted to talk about, but we'll definitely want to kind of, Eric, hear from you, like your overall thoughts on the finale, was this mystery of Tak Rennet. And the reason why I bring this up is his ship is on At-Aten. Where is he? He was supposedly killed in a mutiny, right? We learn about that. But I thought it'd be far more interesting if he became a resident of the planet itself.
Right.
And the reason why I say that is, for a pirate, it seemed like he took a lot of steps to secure the planet's safety. I'm thinking about the fact that he wiped SM-33's memory. He instructed SM-33 to destroy the coordinates to At-Aten, which we see on the pillar in the Fallen Sanctum on At-Akron. And there's probably a whole host of other things that we could point to. The fact that, the answers to what the kids and Jod are seeking are, kind of buried deep beneath this mountain on a planet far
under
away.
A pool of acid.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a spa now. But you understand where I'm going with this? Like, there's
Absolutely.
a lot of mystery to this guy.
That it would be a heck of a Deus Ex Machina, or it'd be a heck of a MacGuffin, or just a flimsy plot explanation to not actually have that character come back. It's kind of like in Pirates of the Caribbean, I want to say 3, where they introduced Jack Sparrow's dad, played by Keith Richards. It would essentially be, who could be more of a pirate than Jod is shown to be a pirate? And it's like, Jod's dad, but also this character, this pirate who, after all, we have to thank him for the ship that sets the whole, series in motion. I think just in listening to you talk about this and the various touchstones of where that character came up, I'm realizing that he was in the series a lot more for a character that's never formally introduced. I think maybe you hear his voice talking in like a hollow.
Yeah, but you don't see his face. Which
you don't see his face.
Important.
And so I'm kind of waiting for a reveal, like you're saying, I think is what you're saying.
That's what I was hoping to get in the finale, is that we were going to get this reveal that, in fact, this character had been a part of the series since episode 1, right?
Wouldn't it be crazy even if he was the supervisor?
Yeah, I'd seen a lot of theories on that. It's certainly possible. I don't know. I think they had mentioned that Stephen Fry voiced the supervisor.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, I don't know if that's the same voice that we hear in the hologram, but it doesn't have to be.
It could be disguised.
It could be disguised. I think, maybe he was the supervisor, and maybe at the end of the day, he found something that he really liked in At-Aten and he wanted to protect it. And that's why his ship was buried there, because, he came there and he never left. He perhaps staged his own death and spread rumors and stories about, it's not to say he wasn't a pirate at one point, but there's more to this guy. I think I would hope that there's
sounds
more
like a crackpot theory, if you ask me. But
it is a bit of a crackpot theory. But what did you think of the finale?
I really applaud. It seems like the showrunners had a very clear idea of what making a show for children about children would do in the live action medium. The fact that the good guys, this former Rebel Alliance, now the New Republic, X-Wing fighters squadron are called in to clean up the pirates. The pirates, who we have at times feared this season, get their asses handed to them and they run scared. Many of them don't die. They're just really, really running fast from the good guys. And there's no, by the standards of a regular Star Wars series, you would say anticlimactic. You said no cliffhanger. You're right. But I also felt like, wasn't it just like a kid's movie that we would have seen growing up, where the bad guys, think of Home Alone, the wet bandits are arrested. They live, they're healthy, they're not too injured, although they should be. After what that poor kid did to them, they live to fight another day. And so the fact that these pirates just get their asses boobied, like bombed, but they all mostly seem to survive, or you would be surprised if every single one of the characters that we recognize walked away from that huge climactic battle, I think has more to do with the commitment to what type of show it would be, and not the show forgetting that it's supposed to be this terrifying Star Wars battle.
That makes a lot more sense, the way that you just explained it, especially if this is a show for kids. The fact that it is kind of tied up in a nice, neat way. The only character that I think won't be making a reappearance in season 2, unless it's a flashback, is Brutus. Because
what happened to Brutus?
Jod took him out.
Oh, God. Well, that said, I think the series was uneven a few times, and it all goes around Jod's character for me. There's this moment when he talks about carving up their parents to the children. Carving up. That's the phrase he uses.
That's a scare tactic, isn't it?
No. I take him at his word. Like, you really believe he's going to do it. At least I did. I'm very gullible. I'm the Neil. Neil is the character I most relate to. By the way, apropos of nothing, very Hufflepuff character.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Despite the fact
there's
that
a lot of
he's
Hufflepuff
blue.
to Neil.
Yeah, but
again, this goes to Jod's character and wanting to learn a little bit more about him, because when you get to the finale, and maybe it's only because Wim is there and Fern is there, that maybe under other circumstances he would have easily taken out either of their parents. But the fact that they're present, I think, creates a level of hesitation, because there are moments where he could kill any of them, and he chooses not to. So is there a bit of a redemptive quality here? It's hard to say. He has no problem taking out the supervisor, even though the supervisor is a droid.
Yeah. But no, I think I see what you see. I saw what you saw. Even the moment where Wim's father is reaching for the handle to destroy the barrier, and Jod is using the Force to prevent his hand from doing it. You see his dad's hand kind of hesitate. He could have broken all of his fingers. Like, it doesn't take that much force to do that. And if this were that type of show, that's exactly what you would have seen. And in fact, if it were a Sith we're dealing with and not Jod, who we spent half the season trusting and kind of looking to for advice. That's the interesting thing about Jod I want to see real quick, is like, how much did he become the de facto leader, even though Fern was captain and she constantly had to remind him of the fact, just because he's an adult and all the rest of them are kids. How much did we look to him, and how much did we look up to him too, to have all the right answers, because he's the only adult in the room?
That's a great question. Yeah.
So I don't know, when dealing with this feeling of like unevenness with the character, I wonder how much of it is because it's such a, I don't think we fully appreciate or realize yet just how much of a unique situation this whole show was, of having 4 friggin' children
Of
and 1
course, you
adult.
would default to the adult, but in this case, the adult is a pirate with ulterior
Flawed.
motives and
Yeah.
extremely flawed.
Possibly evil. One thing I liked, and I agree with you on the whole that Jod is a character I'd love to see more of, including more backstory in season 2 if there is one. He at least does explain a little bit about how he can use the Force. In the finale, he talks about a Jedi taking him under her wing, telling him that he had potential, and this was when he was growing up poor, and she is slaughtered in front of him. And I think that even though it's a short blink and you'll miss it type sentence, he says it to at least 2 sets of kids and parents. And I think it does kind of explain who he was channeling in those moments when he was nice to Wim, in those sort of more tender moments with the kids. I think he was remembering, because if you don't have an example of a parental figure, you're going to emulate the next closest thing. And I think that perhaps those moments when we really see him use the Force and tell the children that the distance between you and that the keys across the room is only in your head. These moments of sort of mentorship are probably very similar to the mentorship he got from whoever this Jedi was.
I think that's a really great point. So,
but it's easy to miss, I think, especially because
it's very much said in passing. And so that would be another area, like you're saying, to explore. And I think one big question I had as this season wrapped up is, what is the future of AT-AT? Now that they have been exposed, revealed, it's not like they're going to put those barriers back up. At least it doesn't seem like that's even possible at this point.
It doesn't. Yeah.
So they are now completely open to the rest of the galaxy. And what kind of implications does that have for the characters who we know who live here and the larger community that lives here?
I mean, I can't help but think of all that money. Their future is whatever that planet wants it to be, because the Republic Mint, either Old Republic or High Republic Mint, for which the planet was hidden in the first place, along with the rest of them, is going to allow them to dictate pretty much any terms they want. That said, the pirates had them over a barrel. They have next to no defenses as a planet besides the barrier. And so the New Republic coming in and saving all their butts from whatever servitude Jod was going to impose on the whole planet, whatever debauchery the rest of the pirates would have forced everyone into, they owe the Republic one. I don't know immediately what the future is, but I think that just like these 4 children, there must be more citizens of AT-AT that would be better suited off-world, or even just the reveal in the finale that the supervisor was a droid, and knowing that the sort of police droids are all run by the supervisor. There's no real human supervision. The fact that Fern's mother, the undersecretary, like the next highest person up in government, doesn't know or doesn't care or like gets nowhere with needing to do what she needs to do, because of the fact that these humans and other assorted creatures are being managed by machines, feels wrong. It feels it feels unnatural, actually. And so I think that what I'd like to see is the planet figuring out how they can get back from essentially being overrun by AI and figure out how they can do things for themselves again.
Definitely. And
like, think about how
the
big
supervisor in the first place.
Well, right. Think about how big that observation tower was. How the room in the observation tower that had all those separate control consoles with all those separate buttons. I bet that was fully manned at one point. Before the supervisor itself, or before everything was run by droids, I'd like to believe there was an entire council or group of technicians in there that did, the things that you need to do. And at some point they went Wall-E about it all and just became, sort of, they ceased being really a culture at that point.
And what's their relationship moving forward with some of these other planets that are within their system that they're clearly connected to? We see one at Akron, but we know that there's more from being inside of that fallen sanctum and hearing the names called out as the kids ran from pillar to pillar.
Well, and I wonder, because I think Kim might have been the one that said they're all gone except for Ad Aden, but but Ad Akron
she was
wasn't.
wrong about one of them. So.
Well, no, but that's exactly, you're thinking exactly the way you're supposed to be thinking.
It had Hunger Games vibes for me, actually. That was, when you start to realize all the other districts are
really there.
The
myth. Yeah. Well, it has big, noble, and most ancient House of Black vibes for me, being blasted off the tapestry. The way that the coordinates were scored off the columns in the no, I love At Akron and would love to see not only that character, Neil's crush, come back in a season 2, but I care for their culture of trading these llama-like creatures, and I hope that everything goes well for them on that planet. Good luck with your war. The shocking thing to me is how much I care about the worlds kind of shown in this series, because it's just a fun flyaway adventure series with these kids, but you get kind of emotional stakes haphazardly or as a consequence. I came away really loving it.
I totally agree. It was a fun show to start things off in 2025, and I hope they do get a second season and can explore this part of the world, part of the galaxy a little bit more. I think there's plenty more to dig into around Skeleton Crew. So if folks who are listening want us to do that, definitely let us know.
Here's an Easter egg I noticed while watching. When Jod is getting a tour of the vault and is asking about how many other vaults there are that are filled to the brim with gold, the robot said, or the droid,
planes,
the droids, I forgot
robots.
what universe I was in. Briefly, it happens every day. The droid says there are 1,139 other vaults, and 1138 is George Lucas's college film, THX 1138. Is the name of his student film. So 1138 is ultimately it's a very Star Wars thing. It's a very Lucas thing. There are other examples of it, but that is a classic Easter egg.
And the Jabba the Hutt.
The Jabba character that was eating the other guy and was like, no, sir, not again, please and
Clearly
thank you.
He's been eaten a few times, so or we don't know what
interesting physiology
activities were going on there with that.
I like that though, because as much as the childlike sense of wonder comes from being young, the Star Wars universe has that in spades anyway. So I think it was a nice marriage between the whimsical nature that the galaxy can hold and also being a kid again. So I felt young watching this. This felt great.
Yeah, you're drawn to the characters. You connect with them on certain levels, and they evoke emotion at different times that is reminiscent. It's nostalgic. But I would say if you liked Stranger Things, the earlier seasons, you'll like Skeleton Crew.
I think so. I agree with that.
And there's
100%.
very much a Stranger Things moment, in my opinion anyway, with when the kids are riding those hover bikes. It gave me a little bit of a throwback to the kids from Stranger Things riding their bikes.
Which itself is probably based on E.T. I'm surprised that the hover bikes didn't go over the moon at some point. in a shot. Maybe they thought it would be too much, but yeah, kids on bikes, more kids on bikes in Star Wars.
That's another throwback to being a kid, at least in the 80s and 90s, probably before that too.
Yeah, so all the 80s feels, for sure. And I agree with your recommendation of, if you like that, you would like this. So thanks to all of our listeners who listened to this special length episode of Skeleton Crew. Don't forget to follow us in your favorite podcast and social media app. We are on YouTube. Please leave us a review, comment. We will read all of it. And that, Micah, thank you for joining me,
Of course,
is the hype around Skeleton Crew.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.